At my sister Celine's wedding, during the reception, her new mother-in-law raised a glass and said with a smile, "Don't worry, she won't last. She's been divorced twice." Celine froze mid-laugh. You could see it hit her like a punch to the chest. Her smile vanished. She looked over at her new husband, Nathan, but he didn't say a word, just kept grinning, like it was some sort of joke. I stood there, watching from a few feet away, my hands clenched at my sides. My sister had survived 2 painful divorces. This day was supposed to be her fresh start, her moment. And that woman, Dolores, just cut through her like she was disposable. I didn't say anything. Not yet. Then, from the back of the room, a woman stood up. She looked calm, controlled. She was in her late 30s, dressed in a slate blue dress that didn't quite fit the theme, like maybe she hadn't planned to attend. She held up her phone and said, loud and clear, "Actually, I'm his first wife, and you need to see this." Everyone turned. The music stopped. Chairs scraped on the floor. The groom, Nathan, went pale. That's when everything unraveled. "My name is Kaya. I'm 35, a high school English teacher, and I've always been more of an observer than a participant. I'm the older sister who fixes things quietly in the background. I don't cause scenes. I don't create drama. But that day, at my sister's wedding, I stood at the edge of something that would change all of us. Celine, my younger sister, had always been the bright one. She had a laugh that made strangers turn and smile. She believed in second chances even after most people would have stopped trying. At 32, she was walking down the aisle for the 3rd time, wearing a dress that shimmered in the late afternoon sun. Her eyes full of hope I didn't dare question out loud. We were standing on a sunlit vineyard just north of Napa. Rows of vines stretched behind the ceremony site. The smell of wild lavender in the air, candles flickering in glass jars. It was beautiful, handcrafted, the kind of wedding that felt like a movie. But the tension in my stomach wouldn't let me enjoy it. I told myself it was just nerves. Weddings are emotional. It wasn't my place to doubt her choice. Nathan, her groom, was the kind of man who knew how to win a room. Tall, clean-cut, expensive smile. The first time I met him, I remember thinking he was almost too polished. He made eye contact a beat too long. He touched your arm when he talked. It wasn't rude, just calculated. Still, Celine adored him. She said he made her feel seen again. After 2 failed marriages, one to a narcissist, the other to a man who vanished without warning, she said Nathan made her feel safe. Our parents were relieved. Our mom, Marla, cried when Selena told her about the proposal. She told me she hadn't seen that spark in her eyes since college. Our dad, James, had a different reaction. He stayed quiet, nodded once, and changed the subject. That's how he was. When he didn't trust something, he held it in until it exploded. And he never liked Nathan. I think he saw what we didn't. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a blur. Celine dove into planning like her life depended on it. Every napkin ring, every flower petal had to be just right. She said she wanted this one to feel permanent. She didn't want it to be something she looked back on and questioned later. As maid of honor, I stood by her through dress fittings, wine tastings, vendor calls, and late-night crying spells when she said things like, "What if I'm the problem?" I always told her the same thing. No one who loves like you do is the problem. The morning of the wedding, I found her standing alone in front of a full-length mirror, adjusting her earrings with trembling fingers. She asked me, "Do you think I deserve this?" I told her, "More than anyone I know." And I meant it. She was nervous, but it felt like the good kind. The kind of nerves that come with starting something big. I helped her into her dress, laced up the back, and we laughed about how ridiculous the whole wedding industry is. For a moment, it felt light. I wanted to believe we'd look back on this day with nothing but warmth. The ceremony itself went smoothly. Vows were exchanged. People clapped, cried, clinked glasses. The photos turned out gorgeous. The sun dipped just enough to bathe everyone in gold. If someone had paused the moment right then, frozen it in a frame, it would have looked like the beginning of a love story. But things shifted at the reception. It started small, a comment from Dolores, Nathan's mother, when we were lining up for photos. She leaned toward me and whispered, "Third time's the charm, right?" I forced a laugh, unsure how to respond. Her tone was light, but her eyes were sharp. That was the first red flag. Still, Selene looked happy. She glowed. Her hand never left Nathan's arm. I kept telling myself not to ruin it by overthinking. People say awkward things at weddings. Emotions run high. Not every comment means something sinister. I had no idea what was waiting behind her smile or what Nathan was hiding behind his. And then came the moment at the reception. The toast. The silence. The woman in the blue dress standing in the back. I thought I knew what kind of story we were in. I thought this was Selene's redemption arc. But weddings have a way of revealing what's been buried. And once the truth stood up and spoke, there was no going back. The reception was already in full swing. The sun had set behind the hills, leaving the vineyard bathed in soft golden lights strung between the oak trees. Music played, wine flowed, and the air buzzed with the kind of warmth that only happens when people are convinced they're celebrating something good. Selene and Nathan were sitting at the sweetheart table, leaning into each other, faces lit up by the flicker of candles and the occasional camera flash. She looked beautiful. More than that, she looked relieved, like she'd made it to the other side of something painful and was finally safe. I watched from our family's table with a drink in my hand and a knot in my stomach I still couldn't explain. Something about the whole evening felt overly rehearsed, too perfect. Nathan never left her side. His mother, Dolores, moved through the crowd like she was hosting her own party. She gave hugs that felt stiff and compliments that cut just beneath the surface. When she finally walked up to the microphone to give her toast, I braced myself. She raised her glass and smiled at the room with the confidence of someone who had always assumed she'd be the loudest voice in it. "I just want to say how happy I am to welcome Selene into our family," she began, voice smooth, practiced. It takes real courage to walk down that aisle more than once. And well, you've certainly done that. People laughed. Not everyone. The laugh was polite, uncomfortable. Selene's shoulders tensed, but she kept smiling. Nathan put a hand on her leg beneath the table. Dolores continued, "I always say, if at first you don't succeed, try again. Third time's the charm, right? Don't worry, sweetie, you probably won't last. But that's okay. You've been divorced twice already. You know how this works." The room fell dead silent. Selene stopped breathing. Her face dropped, lips parting slightly as if she was trying to form a response, but couldn't find words. She didn't cry, didn't shout, didn't move. She just stared at Dolores like she was trying to understand what had just been said in front of 100 people. My mother gasped audibly. My father sat up straighter in his chair, his hands curling into fists on the table. I could feel the tension rise in my chest, hot and sharp. I looked at Nathan. He wasn't laughing, but he wasn't shocked either. He just stared ahead, jaw clenched, as if this wasn't the first time his mother had embarrassed someone he loved. Selene's hand moved to her lap. I could see her fingers digging into the fabric of her dress. She still said nothing. I wanted to stand up. I wanted to walk over and say something that would make this woman sit down and shut her mouth, but I didn't know what. I felt frozen, like Selene. There was something about the way Dolores had said it. Casual, dismissive, as if my sister's past made her unworthy of this moment. Then, before anyone else could respond, a voice called out from the back of the room. "Actually, she's not the one you should be worried about." Everyone turned. A woman had stood up from one of the last rows of tables. She looked composed, calm, but her eyes locked onto Nathan like a spotlight. She held up her phone. "I'm Lila," she said, "and I'm his first wife." A ripple of shock moved through the guests. Murmurs rose like a tide. Some people turned to Nathan for an explanation, but he was frozen, pale. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Dolores stepped back, visibly confused. "What is this?" she snapped. Lila walked forward, holding her phone higher. "This is a copy of our marriage certificate, and this," she added, tapping the screen, "is a photo of us, from last summer, because he never filed for divorce." Selene looked like she'd been knocked out of her own body. She was staring straight ahead, blinking slowly, her mouth tightening into something between disbelief and devastation. Nathan finally moved. "Lila, stop, not here." "She didn't. You never told her you lied to her, just like you lied to me." I stood up and made my way to Selene. I touched her shoulder gently. She didn't flinch. Her face was stone. That was the moment the room turned. The celebration was gone, replaced by a wave of whispers, side eyes, and questions. Dolores's smugness collapsed. Nathan looked cornered. Celine looked like she had just witnessed her future dissolve in real time. And I knew, without a doubt, this wedding had just ended in a way none of us saw coming. I stood next to Celine, my hand resting on her shoulder, waiting for her to react, to breathe, to do anything at all. But she didn't move. She was staring at Lila like she was trying to make sense of the moment, like maybe she was hallucinating. Her face had gone pale. The glow that had followed her all day was gone, replaced with a kind of stillness I had only seen once before, when she signed the divorce papers with her first husband. Lila held her phone steady. "You deserve to know the truth," she said directly to Selene. "I didn't come here to humiliate you. I came here because someone had to stop him from doing this again." The guests were frozen in place, unsure whether to sit or stand, whether to stay or flee. The music had stopped. The air had changed. I could feel the heat building at the back of my neck, that electric tension that comes when people are trying to pretend they're still at a party, but know they're actually witnessing something fall apart. Nathan finally stepped forward. His face was blank, but his eyes darted to Celine, then to Lila, then back again. "Celine, let me explain," he said, his voice low, almost rehearsed. "It's not what it looks like." Celine blinked once, then again. She turned her head toward him slowly. "You're still married," she said. Her voice was calm, but her words cut through the air like glass. "She's your wife." Nathan shook his head. "It's complicated. I meant to file. We've been separated for years. We're not together. You have to believe me." "Then why did you lie?" she asked. He paused. "I didn't want to lose you," he said, and for a second I saw something flicker in his expression, regret maybe, or just the fear of consequences finally catching up. Lila stepped forward. "I gave him the chance to tell you. I begged him to be honest before your wedding. I thought he would do the right thing, but he didn't. He told me he needed the marriage to happen, that you were his fresh start." Celine exhaled slowly, like she was trying to release a weight pressing against her chest. She reached up and began to unclip the veil from her hair. Her hands trembled slightly. She placed it gently on the table in front of her. Dolores, who had been silent for the past few minutes, finally stepped in. "This is absurd," she said, her voice sharp and defensive. "You let that woman come here and ruin my son's wedding? What kind of person does that?" Celine turned her gaze toward her. "You said I wouldn't last, that I've been divorced twice, but your son isn't just a liar. He's a married liar. And you," she pointed calmly, "you stood there and mocked me before you even knew the truth. I guess now you don't have to worry about whether I'll last. I won't." Dolores opened her mouth to respond, but Celine had already turned back to Nathan. "You let me walk down that aisle thinking I was your future," she said, voice rising. "You looked me in the eye and promised me things that belonged to someone else. You let your mother belittle me while you stood there and said nothing." Nathan reached out for her hand. She pulled back immediately. "I need to go," she whispered, almost to herself. I stepped in closer and nodded. "We're leaving," I said. "Now." Selene stood slowly. Her legs looked unsteady, but she didn't fall. She straightened her back, took a breath, and started walking toward the edge of the tent where the cars were parked. Guests parted as we passed, whispering, unsure if they should speak. No one tried to stop her. No one tried to defend him, not even Dolores. As we moved through the crowd, Lila followed behind for a few steps. She reached into her purse, pulled out a folded envelope, and handed it to Celine. "This is everything," she said. "Dates, emails, copies of the paperwork. I don't want anything from him. I just thought you should know exactly what he's been hiding." Celine took it without a word. She didn't even look inside. She held it in her hand like a broken piece of something she no longer needed to carry. When we reached the car, she slid into the passenger seat and stared out the window. I sat beside her, started the engine, and waited. Finally, she spoke. "It's not that he lied. It's that he knew I would have stayed anyway if he had just told the truth." That was the first time she cried, And that's when I knew this wasn't just the end of a wedding. It was the beginning of something she should have had years ago, the chance to walk away before she lost herself again. We sat in the parked car outside the vineyard for a long time, not speaking. The laughter and music hadn't returned behind us. The celebration was over. Whatever joy the day had promised was gone. Celine stared at her reflection in the passenger side window. Her wedding makeup was still perfect, but her eyes were hollow. She didn't wipe away the tears. She just let them sit there like they belonged. I wanted to say something comforting, but there was nothing I could offer that would make this right. I couldn't undo what had just happened. All I could do was be still beside her while it sunk in. Eventually, she opened the envelope Lila had given her. Inside was a neatly stapled packet of documents: a marriage certificate, a signed lease agreement from a joint apartment in Seattle, recent emails, and, most damning of all, a photo of Nathan and Lila at a barbecue, dated just 7 months earlier. He had his arm around her waist. They were smiling like nothing in the world was broken. Celine held the photo in both hands. "I believed him," she said softly. "Every word. I thought I'd finally found someone who didn't see me as disposable." "You're not," I said quickly. She shook her head, but I acted like I was. That's what I hate most. I saw the signs. I felt it. The way he rushed everything. The way his stories didn't always line up. His mom was awful to me from day one, and I kept telling myself she'd come around. I ignored everything. I just wanted to believe this one would be different. I reached over and took the photo from her hand, sliding it back into the envelope. "You were hopeful. That's not a crime. That doesn't make you weak." She turned toward me, finally looking into my eyes. "It makes me tired. I don't want to have to be brave like this anymore. I just want peace." "You'll get it," I said. "But first you need to go back in there and say what you need to say. Not for him. For you." Celine didn't speak. She looked at the vineyard behind us, then at her dress. "It's too late." "No," I said. "You still have your voice. That's not nothing." 10 minutes later, we walked back into the reception. Guests were still there, scattered in clusters. Some were leaving quietly, pretending not to notice us. Others watched us like a car crash they couldn't look away from. Nathan was sitting alone at the sweetheart table, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. His mother stood beside him, arms crossed, whispering something in his ear. Lila had moved to the side of the tent. She looked at us and gave the smallest nod, a silent message that she wasn't going to speak again. Her part was done. Celine didn't hesitate. She walked straight to the microphone at the center of the tent. Her heels clicked against the wooden floor, sharp and purposeful. The noise died instantly. She stood there for a moment, and then she began. "I want to thank everyone who came today," she said. "Many of you traveled across the country to be here. You showed up for me. You cheered for me. You believed this was a beginning. And so did I." She glanced at Nathan, then back at the crowd. "But the truth is, it wasn't. It was a performance. I was standing beside a man who lied to me every day we were together, a man who let his mother humiliate me in front of you all and stayed silent, a man who told me I was his future while he was still tied to his past." There were no gasps now, no interruptions, just the sound of her voice steady and rising. "I'm not ashamed of being divorced. I'm not ashamed of loving too hard, but I am done letting other people define what I deserve. So I won't be anyone's third chance. I won't be someone's cover story. I'm walking away, and I am not broken." She placed the microphone back in the stand, walked to the sweetheart table, and removed the ring from her finger. She placed it neatly beside her untouched plate. Nathan stood up. "Celine, wait." She turned to him, and for the first time all day she smiled, but it wasn't soft. It was final. "You had your chance. Now you can sit in the truth you tried to bury." And with that, she turned and walked out. I followed her, heart pounding, proud in a way that felt bigger than words. People didn't clap. They didn't need to. The silence was full of something heavier, the kind of silence that follows a reckoning. That day was supposed to be the beginning of her marriage. Instead, it became the moment she reclaimed herself. We didn't go home that night. After leaving the vineyard, Selena and I checked into a small boutique hotel 20 minutes away. She didn't want to answer questions or explain anything to anyone. She didn't want to hear apologies or condolences. She wanted quiet. She wanted space. When we got into the room, she took off the dress and sat on the edge of the bed in a tank top and leggings, her bare feet on the carpet, her makeup still somehow intact. She looked exhausted, like she had aged 10 years in a single day, but there was something different in her eyes now, something settled, something clear. She didn't speak for a long time. I sat across from her and waited. Finally, she said, "I don't feel angry. I thought I would, but I don't." "What do you feel?" I asked. "Free," she said. "That's the word that keeps coming to me." We ordered food and barely touched it. She showered and came out with wet hair, wrapped in a towel, and smiled for the first time since everything fell apart. "You know what's weird?" she said. "I feel lighter." The next morning, she called our parents and told them everything. My mom cried. My dad didn't say much, but I heard the steady breath on the other end of the call. I knew he was holding back everything he wanted to say. He didn't say, "I told you so." He didn't need to. In the weeks that followed, Celine filed for an annulment. Her lawyer moved fast. Lila had already sent over copies of everything. There were no drawn-out court battles, no begging for explanations. Nathan didn't fight it. He signed the paperwork quietly and disappeared. His mother didn't reach out, not once. Celine went off social media. She cut ties with every guest who tried to gossip. She kept only the ones who sent messages of support without asking for details. She returned the wedding gifts. She donated her dress. And then she rested. For months, she gave herself permission to not chase closure. She didn't look for new love. She didn't look for distractions. She started therapy. She began journaling every night. She picked up an old hobby, pottery, something she used to love before she got married the first time. She joined a small studio across town and started making things with her hands again. She said it felt good to create something that didn't need to be perfect. We talked every day, sometimes about nothing, sometimes about everything. One night, 6 months later, she came over with a bottle of wine and a grin on her face. "I met someone," she said. I didn't panic. I didn't rush to protect her. I just listened. His name was Elias. He was quiet, kind, a widower. He didn't rush her. He didn't try to save her. He just showed up week after week and let her be exactly who she was. He asked questions and actually waited for answers. He didn't flinch at her story. He just held space for it. I met him 3 weeks after that. I liked him immediately. He didn't charm the room like Nathan. He didn't dominate the conversation. He helped my mom carry dishes to the kitchen. He asked my dad about his garden. He brought Celine a tea without her asking. This time, it felt real. And Celine? She looked grounded, not high on hope, not desperate to prove anything, just steady. She told me later that she didn't feel like she was starting over. She said, "I'm just continuing. This is me, moving forward. No more reinventions, no more fixing broken people, just walking my own way. And if someone wants to walk with me, great, but I'm not dragging anyone ever again." I think about that a lot. Looking back, I used to wish I'd said something sooner. I used to wonder if I could have stopped the wedding before it happened. But the truth is, she had to see it for herself. She had to hear those words, face that betrayal, and walk away on her own terms. Because that moment, when she stood in front of that room and reclaimed her voice, that was the real beginning. Not the wedding, not the dress, not the ring. The moment she chose herself over the story she thought she was supposed to live. And watching her do that, that was the most beautiful part of the whole day. If this story moved you or reminded you of someone who's been through something similar, share it with them. Sometimes all it takes is hearing one voice to help someone find their own. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever watched someone walk away from something they thought was love? Or maybe you've had to do it yourself. Drop a comment below. Let's talk about it. And if stories like this speak to you, if you believe in truth, strength, and second chances, go ahead and like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next one. Thanks for being here. See you in the next story.